Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar of the CSSL at CUHK. My name is Qingliang Fan, now Assistant Professor at Department of Economics. I am also the co-theme leader of this research theme, Artificial Intelligence for Social Goods. This morning, we're very honored and very happy to have our speaker with us today, Dr. Haishan WU.
Thank you.
Now, let me just briefly introduce Dr. WU. He is the Deputy General Manager of the AI department in WeBank. And before that, he also had working experience as the Director and AI Scientists in BlackRock and the lead data scientist in Baidu. He got his PhD degree in Fudan University, and also he had a research experience in Princeton. He was also recognized as the 35 innovators under 35 years old in China by the MIT Technology Review in 2017. So he is a well-acknowledged and expert in this area of artificial intelligence. And today, Dr. WU will give us a very interesting talk titled Senseable Economics, from demystifying China's economy to tackling climate change. I believe there will be a very rich information on this artificial intelligence and how this affects the whole economy and our daily life. Now, without further ado, please welcome Dr. WU for this great speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fan, for your introduction, and thank you very much for your invitation from Professor Huang. And I'm very happy, and actually I'm very honored to share what I'm doing now and what I have done in my previous research. So basically, the title of today's talk is named Senseable Economics. I think most of you have never heard of this name because this term was coined by myself. So actually, the sensible comes from two words, the sensor and able. That means you can sense the dynamics around economic system by analyzing different kind of data. So especially on the Internet of the Things data. So this is today's I'm basically focused on how I just in my previous research I use AI technology to analyze different types of sensor data, try to sense the dynamics of our economic system. I'm from WeBank. So WeBank is the first, and I think it's the largest digital bank in China, backed by Tencent. So our company has a very large AI department. So our team focuses on how we can use AI and sensor data, try to do some social good things like ESG and carbon neutral. So before I going through the concept of sensible economics, I would like to share a very interesting video. So maybe some of you have watched this video from like the documentary from BBC or from other movies. So basically, it is a flocking birds somewhere in Europe. The numbers could be thousands of them. You can see they can fly together. They can exhibit very beautiful pattern, and they never collide with each other. So this is very interesting. Actually, my PhD thesis is about computer vision. It's like how you can reconstruct the three-dimensional face of that today you can use in your iPhone. But actually, at that time, I was very fascinated by this kind of phenomenon in the nature. I was curious whether I can use computer vision technology to solve this problem. You have to work together with a biologist, right? So I later joined Princeton University and focus on another type of animal, that is fish. So I'm also very curious why the fish, they can swim in school. It's like the flocking birds, right? So this is what we have done in Princeton University. Basically, we have a very large fish tank. We put a lot of fish in this tank, from like 100 to nearly 1,000 fish, small fish in the tank. And then we mount a camera with high speed and high resolution camera above the fish tank. So we can collect high resolution and high speed videos to capture the motion of the schooling fish. So my work at that time focused on to develop computer vision software and AI algorithm, try to analyze the motion trajectories of these schooling fish and try to see whether we can demystify why the animal can exhibit such very beautiful pattern, which is called the animal collateral behavior. So basically, this is the result from my tracking software, and you can see each block indicates an individual face. That means you can see how our software is able to track the motion of each schooling face in this very large fish tank. So after you collect the fish, collect the location data, the trajectory data, so you can build a machine learning model to analyze those data. So basically, at that time, we also use the computer graphic technology like the ray tracing algorithm, try to build a visual field of the fish. So basically, you can, because we can detect the location of the fish eye, so you can see, so you can better use the ray tracing algorithm, try to build a visual field of the schooling fish. That is, the bright one area is, that means the more fish can see this area. So basically, you can see what kind of visual information that could be collected by each individual fish. So by this way, we build a social network of fish. So you can, by this way, we can model how the information is transferring in a schooling fish. It's like how the rumor is transferred in the Facebook, right? So I will also build a model to see or to investigate how the leader could impact the behavior of the fish. So this is very interesting research at that time, as I have done in Princeton. And later, actually, I think it's in 2014. I was in Princeton at that time, but I was attracted by a very interesting project from Baidu, which is called Baidu Migration. Some of you may know there was a very interesting visualization project from Baidu. They basically visualize the geolocation data from the smartphone, try to review the pattern during a Spring Festival, because you know a lot of people, they will go back home, right, during the Spring Festival. So you can exhibit a very beautiful mobility pattern during the Spring Festival by visualizing the geolocation data. So I was thinking at the time, if I could analyze such data, then that will be able to analyze the behavior, the collective behavior of human beings instead of the animals. So I later just left Princeton and joined Baidu. I was very lucky at that time that I can access the geolocation data and try to build a different model to analyze that data to quantify the behavior of human beings. So basically, this picture shows the visualization results of the geolocation data of one day. I think that day was the Spring Festival Eve of 2016. So basically, we have no map data. We just simply visualize the geolocation data of the whole China. So you can see the data itself is able to sense the structure and the economic, condition of different areas, the regional economic of different areas, right? So we published this paper on the EPD data science. Basically, we do a lot of interesting research by analyzing such geolocation data. The first one is like, if you zoom in this part, you can see very, very clear structure that is, shaped by our data. You can see this is the shape of the Yellow River, the Yangtze River, the Tai Lake, and you can see different, this is like, I think this is Xi'an, this is Zhengzhou. So you can see the geolocation data itself is able to sense the dynamics of our economic system. So yeah, this is another animation shows the data of Beijing city. It's 24 hours. We just visualize the data with the frequency of, like, I remember it's 50 minutes. So it is like the heartbeat of the human beings, right? I call it like the heartbeat of the city. So you can see such data, especially the geolocation data from a smartphone, is able try to solve a lot of problems in our social economic system. So the first one part of my talk is how we use such data, try to demystify China's economic system. So the first question is about the unemployment rate. So this is, you can see this is the volatility of GDP in China, the growth and the unemployment rate. So basically, no matter how the GDP fluctuates, you can see the unemployment rate keeps very steady at 5%, right? So that is a lot of economics, economists, they are very interesting to see how it happens. So basically, we collaborate with the government and try to see whether we can use our location data to solve this problem. So basically, we use a machine learning algorithm, try to detect where the people work and where the people live with very high accuracy by using machine learning algorithm. So this image shows that The red color shows where the people live, and the blue color shows where the people work. So you can see they're pretty different, right? That means by this way, we can count, for one area, how many people in there work there and how many people live there. So this helps us to track the ups and downs of the labor force market in China. So this is two typical offices or industrial parks in China. The first one is one shoes factory in Dongguan. So you can see after 2015, the labor force slide down quite a lot. This is because this shoe factory was closed down, mainly because the transform of industry, or maybe this factory, they just basically move to other countries like Vietnam or other countries. So it shows a lot of stories behind the data. The second one is Nokia office in Suzhou. Because this office, they just simply closed their office in Suzhou. So you can see there was a very obvious slide down at this time. But for D and E, they tell another story. So basically the D is the Zhongguancun Software Park in Beijing. A lot of internet IT company, a lot of internet company, they have offices in this park. So at that time, there was a boom of China's technology companies. So you can see the labor force in these areas is going up very, very obviously. And D is another company, is the largest ride-hailing companies in China. At that time, they also expand, it also grows their business in China. So you can see a lot of people came to work at this place. So you can see our data is able to tell, where the people work and how many people working in different areas. So simply by aggregating such data of 2,000 very large industrial parks in China, we can build an employment index of China. So I think this is for the first time we use the data-driven methodology to try to tell the real story of China's employment condition. So basically, we divide the industrial parks into two categories. One is the very traditional manufacturing companies. The other one is the parks with a lot of high-tech companies. So basically, you can see for the high-tech companies at that time, which is like in 2016, you can see the overall employment index is going down. It's going up actually. But for the traditional manufacturing companies, it's sliding down a little bit. So I think the employment index or the employment condition in China is quite complex. You cannot simply use one index to tell the story, right? You have to just group them into different categories and to see what is happening of different parts of different sectors. We also published such index on Bloomberg terminal at that time. So at that time you can access that data, but after I left the Baidu in 2017, actually this index had been stopped to update. So our research also reported by Bloomberg. So they write an article named 6 billion web searches to bring China's economic system into focus. And one professor in Guanghua School of Management at Peking University, they have accompanied our research in this way. I think this is very interesting. So they said, at first it's like we are running around pointing a flashlight at various different things like in labor or pulse, right? Try to sense our economic system in different small parts. But for the first time, our research is like turning on the lights, and suddenly you can see everything like of China's economic system by analyzing such data. So the second secret we try to demystify is about China's real estate market. I think this is so-called ghost town in China, right? I think a lot of people know this. There are a lot of people say that, and a lot of reports that there are a lot of ghost towns in China, but nobody knows where are those ghost towns exactly located, and how many ghost towns, how many empty buildings in China. There's no exact numbers, no exact figures actually. So I was very curious about this phenomenon. So at the time we collaborated with Professor Liu Yu in Peking University to see how we can use our geolocal data to see and to map the locations of China's ghost towns. So as I said, we can use the machine learning algorithm to see where the people live and where the people work. So simply by counting the number of where the people live, we can map the locations of the ghost towns in China. So this is two typical ghost towns we detected, in these areas, and those buildings, there's really no people live there. So this is the top 9 cities with lots of ghost towns in China. So you can, based on the structure or on the shape, you can see the name of the city. And at that time, we also visualized our results and have a project called Kongchengji at the time. And we realized the different cities, and we realized that the empty building in different areas. I think this website has been also stopped to update. And I would like to share our latest research about the ghost town phenomenon in China. So, actually, after I left Baidu, I cannot access the geolocation data, right? So I just use another type of data, try to solve this problem. That is satellite data. So I actually use satellite data by using AI algorithm. You are able to detect the number and the location of cars in different areas. So each red color is the location of the cars. So basically, we use a machine learning algorithm, try to detect the cars in different areas, like in the parking lots, in the shopping mall, the parking lots, like in a residential building, or like in a school or in the hospital, or even in the high-speed ways. So basically, by this way, you can count how many cars appeared in this city. So this actually is the result of one famous ghost town, that's Erdos. Erdos has 2 different cities. One is old city, and the other one is a new district, right? So basically, this is the result of new district. So previously, a lot of reports said that the new city is empty. They have a lot of buildings, but no people live there. But our latest finding shows that this ghost city has come into life. More and more people began to live there because a lot more and more cars appeared in this area. So we think that it will take a long time, maybe years, for one ghost towns to become to come back to life. But maybe for some ghost towns, they will just be empty for quite a long time. And actually, not only for Erdos, but this situation also is also the same situation for Zhengzhou New District. So actually, in Zhengzhou New District, there are also a lot of new young people. They just move to live there because maybe I think a lot of infrastructure has been finished, like hospitals, schools, and other things. So basically, it shows that it will take years to change the situation of the ghost towns. So that means this situation is also dynamic. You have to track them from years to years. So this is our latest research. So this is why I propose the concept of the sensible economics. It basically means how you can monitor, how you can sense the dynamics of our economic system by mining massive data from different sensors. The sensor could be like smartphone, as I mentioned. You can use the geolocation data, you can use like Wi-Fi data, mobile data, and you can use the POI data. And basically, one of my intern at that time, and he did very interesting research. So he just grab the data from Meituan and use that POI data. They can also measure like the social economic development of different areas and build a very interesting index. And that paper was published on PNAS. So other sensors could be like the micro satellites. So basically later I will focus on how we just use AI to analyze the data from satellite imagery data and try to solve some very interesting problem. And data could also be like different sensors from Internet of the Things. So I'm also very interested in another type of sensor, that is the data from self-driving cars in the future. So for example, I think maybe in 5 years later, 10 years later, there will be thousands of self-driving cars, self-driving like cabs in Hong Kong or in Shenzhen. That means it's like there are thousands of researchers or analysts that help you to censor what is happening in the city, like how many Starbucks is closed, how many Starbucks is opening, how many hotpot, Haidilao hotpot is closed or opening, whereas factories is open or closed, right? That means you can use such data to sense the dynamics of our city in real time, 24/7, right? So this is very interesting data in the future. So basically, I will now later focus on how we use satellite imagery data for the economic research. So this is one nightlight satellite imagery from NASA, I think. So basically, you can see that the night light data from satellite is able to tell you the story of the regional economic development of different areas. It's like, you can see in the South Korea, it's very bright during night, but in the North Korea, it's pretty dark. It's only Pyongyang is a little bit brighter, right? So that means you can use that data to tell a lot of story behind the country economic development or regional economic development. So some researchers from the Bank of Korea, they basically try to correlate the nocturnal luminosity of the satellite data and correlate them with the GDP per person. So you can see they highly correlated with each other, right? So by this way, they try to estimate the GDP of North Korea, and they found that the GDP they estimated from the luminosity based on the satellite is only a half of the conventional estimated results. So it's a very interesting story. That means you can see different things from the satellite data. And by comparing the luminosity of somewhere in Pyongyang, you can see compared with 2013 and 2015, you can see the average brightness actually is sliding down a little bit. So nobody knows what is happening there, but this is the result from the data. So the reason I would like to talk this topic is like in today, it is now more useful, more easy and more affordable to launch a small satellite into space. And that means it's much easier than ever before to access the satellite imagery data. So by using computer vision algorithm, you can simply analyze the data and try to do a lot of interesting research. So basically, when I joined WeBank in 2019, our team focused on to build a satellite AI platform, basically for fintech application. This is several typical applications of our satellite AI platform. For example, we can also count the number of cars in different parking lots to try to evaluate the revenue of different companies, maybe like the listed company. We can also try to use the algorithm to estimate the location of oil tanks, and also can estimate the area of shadows of oil tanks. By this way, we can estimate the oil storage, not only in China, but the whole globe. We also build a steel manufacturing index, basically to try to evaluate the manufacture activity of steel sector. We also use our platform, try to monitor the infrastructure of different areas in China, because the China's economic system is basically driven by the infrastructure investment in the past few years. We also, and most recently, we also focus on how you can use our platform to estimate or to forecast the carbon stock or biomass of different area, try to evaluate the carbon credit products. And another product is we use our platform, try to detect the locations like for solar farms in China, try to evaluate the progress of China's renewable energy development. The other one is for our ESG research. Basically, we use our platform, try to detect the air pollution, the water pollution of different listed companies, and we also to assess the disaster or damage of nature disaster, like a wildfire or flood in China. So this is several typical applications of our platform. So the part two, I focus on how we gauge the economic impact of COVID of our platform in the past few years. In the past few years, our daily life was fundamentally impacted by this virus. So how can we use our data and use the satellite imagery data, try to evaluate the economic impact of COVID? So the first thing we did at the time was try to investigate the production recovery of different companies. And this is one typical company of Shanghai Tesla factory. Tesla was a listed company, right? And their factory in Shanghai was one of the largest factory in the world. So that means if you can track the production recovery progress, it will be very, very important to evaluate their company value, because this is a listed company. So how we did this? So first, this is the location of the Tesla factory in China, which is very huge. But after we check this imagery data clearly, we found that this is the parking lot of this factory. Basically, the people who work in this factory, when they go to the office, they will park their car in this area. So we found that, okay, if we can use our platform to count and locate the number of cars in this area, so we can basically evaluate the progress of production recovery of this factory. So at the end of January in 2020, at the time, when the pandemic starts, so you can see there are only 18 cars in this area. Only a few number of people just came to the office. That means, the COVID impact this area quite a lot. But only 10 days later, after Chinese New Year, we found there in this area, the parking lot, it was almost full. There is 106 cars in this area. That means this factory is almost came to recover their production at that time. So by this way, we track the production recovery of different companies, including including Tesla and other factories. And a second part is whether we can track the recovery of different sectors, not only for individual companies. So basically, we focus on one sector, that is the steel manufacturing factor, because this sector has very fundamental impact of different sectors, like for real estate, like for other companies. So basically, so how can we do this? So we need factory, when they manufacture when they produce the steel, right? The device could be very extremely hot. That area could be extremely hot. It could be like 2,000 and like 3,000 degrees. So such extreme hot area will emit a short-wave infrared spectral light in that area. So by analyzing the satellite imagery data, which is able to capture such short-wave infrared spectral bands, so basically we can evaluate, we can track the activity of those steel manufacturing companies. You can see in this image, this area is like the red dot area, right? Basically, it is the location of the steel manufacturing locations. So by identify and aggregate such area together, basically we build an index called a steel manufacturing index from the satellite. So by this way, we can track the production of steel in a weekly or bi-weekly, and then maybe monthly, right? So we compare our results with the public results from the governments. So our ones is, you can see it's a red color. The red curve, it shows our result, and the blue one shows the result from published from the government. So you can see they correlate each other very highly, and the correlation could be like, I remember it's more than 90%. But our result could be updated in a very high frequency, like weekly. I think that'd be more useful, not only for the investors, but also for the policymakers at that time. So this is what we did for the steel manufacturing tracking. So the last one is whether we can check the overall recovery of different cities or even in whole China area. So the first part is we built an index called China Economic Recovery Index by analyzing the aggregate mobility data from the websites. So by this we can track, because if you can track how many people go to work, how many people stay at home, you can basically just evaluate the economic recovery of different areas, different cities, right? So you can see the yellow color shows how Shenzhen recovers. So you can see the Shenzhen recovered pretty well at the time. This is the result of 2020. It's not in last year. This is 2020, but 3 years ago. So you can see the Shenzhen, they recovered very quickly at the time. But for other cities like Beijing, because Beijing, they just use a very strict quarantine policies. So you can see Beijing, they recover slower than Shenzhen. And the most slowest one is Wuhan. So you can see basically because Wuhan, the whole city was simply locked down, as you remember from the end of 2020. So you can see the whole city is almost in a straight line. And then they're going to recover from, I think, at the end of March. So basically, you can see the curve tells different stories of the different city of 2020 at that time. And by aggregating the data together, we also built a China Economic Recovery Index of the whole China. So we compared the results of 2020 and our result of 2019. You can see very interesting things from these two curves. So basically, in 2020, the lowest point is at the land. It's about like in the middle of January. It's basically the Yuan Xiaojie. It's a Lantern festival, right? But in 2019, actually the highest point, that means, if there's no COVID, the whole economic, they just fully recover in Lantern Festival. So this is what is happening, and the sharp contrast of these 2 years. So, but the good news that you can see the whole economy is just recovering from this day, and gradually we found that at the end of April, more than 90% of China's economic system has been recovered. So basically, this is the China Economic Recovery Index we compiled at that time. So the last thing is, does the COVID-19 impact our Earth like the climate change? So this animation shows the results of one polluted air. I think it's nitrogen dioxide. So basically, that air pollution basically comes from, like, the vehicles, all the infrastructure, or the manufacturing. So basically, you can see such air pollution can also fluctuate with the COVID. So in China, you can see in 2020, the whole air pollution just was going down. And then it is the same in Europe and in the US. So that means the COVID itself can also have a big impact to the climate change. So the last part, I will focus on how we can use the sensible economics try to tackle the climate change. So this is the animation from ESA, from European Space Agency. I think this is data from 2020 or 2021. So basically, it shows, because of the rise of the temperature, a big chunk of ice with a total size of more than 100 kilometers squares breaks away from the Arctic largest ice shelf, simply because of the rising temperature. So, last year there's a lot of extreme weather in China, right? Like in Chongqing, in Chengdu, it's extremely hot, and it caused the wildfires in different areas. And it has a lot of cost lost in this area. So extreme weather from climate change, it's simply impact our daily life. It's not like the story from the report, right? But it's something that is almost impact our daily life. So this one shows how the global temperature is rising. So basically, I think some of may know the Paris Agreement, right? Which they mean that they try to maintain the increase of our global temperature, the average global temperature is like 2 degrees below the pre-industry level, like between the 1951 to 1980. So, and they try all their best, try to maintain the increase of the temperature below 1.5. So, but this is a very challenging task, because there's only 52 months left for us to keep the warming below 1.5 degrees. There's about 240 months left for us to keep the warm below 2 degrees. This is a pretty challenging task, I think, for our human beings. So different countries have set their carbon neutral goals. Like in China, we try to reach the emission peak like before 2030, right? And try to achieve the carbon neutral goal by 2016. So if you compare the results of China and the US and other countries, you can see this is a very challenging task, right? You have to do a lot of work to achieve this goal, because the curve of China is much more sharp than other countries like in the US and the EU. And actually for European countries, they have already just reached emission peak, like in 1980 at the time, right? So I think this is a very challenging task for China, but we have to work together for this goal. So the question is, where our green gas comes from? So this shows the major emission sources of the greenhouse gas. So energy sector contributes more than 70% of the whole house gas. And in this sector, within this sector, the electricity and heat part contributes almost 1/3 of the whole part. This is the electricity and heat. And the transportation, like our daily vehicles or flights, they contribute about 15% of the carbon emission. And other part like manufacturing, like construction, like steel manufacturing, they contribute like another 22 and another 12% of the carbon emissions. So basically, if we can try very hard like to control the carbon emission of these sectors, we can solve this problem quite a lot, right? So basically, this is the energy consumption in China. So you can see almost more than half of China's energy consumption comes from burning the coal, and the other 20 comes from burning using the oil. And the renewable energy like solar energy, solar power and wind power and hydro power, they only contribute about 10% overall combined. So that means there's still a lot of space for us to use the renewable energy, right? So China has put a lot of efforts to fight climate change by encourage the people to use renewable energy, to use different policies to encourage the progress of the renewable energy. They use a lot of subsidized different companies to try to help them to grow their business. So the thing is, we know there are a lot of solar power farms solar power plants in China, but where are those solar farms in China? What's the total area of these solar farms? Or basically, whether you can track, the policy, how different policy could impact the development of, of the solar farms, sector. So basically, we built a model called SolarNet. It's a deep learning algorithm. For the first time, we use, SolarNet to detect and to locate the solar farms in China by analyzing the satellite imagery data. So basically, each blue dot is a large solar farm we detected. So you can see the solar farm is everywhere in China, right? Not only in the desert area, like in this area in Ningxia or Gansu or Xinjiang, but there are also a lot of solar farms like in the Shandong or in Jiangsu actually. So we see that the solar farms is not only located in the deserts, but it could be also like in the mountains or in the lakes. So these are the real progress of China's solar sector. So those some typical solar farms we detect in China, and it could be like in the desert, it could be in the mountains, or could be in the lakes. And we also found another several very interesting shaped solar farm. The one is like a panel-like solar farms somewhere I remember in Shanxi, Datong. So basically, maybe you can also check this on Google Maps to see. Yeah, so this is very interesting. It shows the progress of China's solar farm sector. So another thing is, China, in order to fight against the climate change, China also encouraged the people to use the EV, right, electric vehicles in China, right? So if we can track the production of EV in China, we can also evaluate the progress of China's renewable market, right? So basically, we use another type of satellite data, which is called a SAR satellite, the synthetic aperture radar satellite. So by this way, we can basically estimate the production of different EV companies. So this shows the production of 3 large and listed EV companies in China. I'm not going to tell the name. You can guess which one. Yeah. So you can see different companies there have different shapes, but most of them you can see the production is going up very rapidly. That means they produce more and more EV cars in China, and more people in China is trying to drive the electric vehicles. So yeah, so by aggregating the data, we also build an EV production index of China to basically can track the whole progress of China EV sector. And we also use another type of data to try to validate our results, which we count the number of charging stations in different cities in China. So you can see the number of charging stations in China is also just going up very rapidly. That means more and more people try to use the electric vehicles in China, which could be very useful, like to reduce the carbon emissions. So the other one, as I said, is a major, the energy contributes most to our carbon emissions in China, right? So, and the power plants is the largest contributor in this sector. So if we can track the carbon emissions from power plants in China, that will be very useful for policy, especially for the governments or policymakers, because this is the largest contributor for carbon emissions in China, right? So this is the location of different power plants we detected from the satellite in China. So later we use AI algorithm, try to detect the location of cooling powers and other equipment areas of these power plants. Then we can also combine the emission result from other satellite. Then we build a machine learning algorithm that is able to estimate the power plant emission of different areas in China of different power plants. So this is the time series of carbon emission we tracked of one specific power plant. And basically we can update the results daily, weekly, or even monthly. So this is the tracking result of the power plant carbon emission tracking results in China. Basically, our system is able to track the carbon emission of more than 2,000 power plants in China. We update the results maybe at present, basically on monthly frequency, but that would be also very good, much better than compared with like a yearly or yearly frequency with from government data. So I think our result could be very, very useful. I think maybe for the policymakers to see how they can, how to say, use different policies to try to control the emissions of different power plants in China. So the last one is how we use carbon finance to tackle climate change. As I said, the carbon emission may come from different power plants or different companies, but how we can use the finance way to solve this problem? That is, is carbon trading or carbon market. There are actually two types of carbon market. One is mandatory market. That is, the government required, like the company, like the power plants, you have to purchase their carbon credit. If you just you have excess carbon emissions. But for other companies, if you have more carbon credit, okay, you can just, if you reduce your carbon emission, you can sell the carbon credit to other companies. And the second part of the voluntary market is like, for one company, like a solar farm company, because they build a lot of solar farms in China. That means they reduce a lot of carbon emissions, right? That means they have earned a lot of carbon credits. So basically, they can sell the carbon credit to other companies, like the power plant, maybe like other companies, like even like WeBank. We also, we also have carbon emissions, right? But we can buy some carbon credit, like from the solar farm company, from the wind, power company. We can just achieve the carbon neutral goal. So this is called the voluntary market. So the government not require, they don't require you to achieve the goal, but the company, they have their social responsibility, their ESG requirement, right? So they can buy some carbon credit to achieve the goal. This is the whole structure of today's voluntary carbon market. So you can see the evolving very quickly at the time. So for the supply side, there are a lot of startups, just they can supply the carbon credits or carbon products. And for many companies in the demand side, like in Stripe, Shopify, Microsoft, because they want to achieve their carbon neutral goal or try to achieve their climate claim. So basically, they can buy a lot of carbon credit. They can buy the carbon credit from different ways. For them, they can directly purchase the carbon credit from the provider, from suppliers. They can also buy such credit from the exchange, from the carbon exchange. I know that Hong Kong, the Hong Kong exchange also has a setup called a call climate or service, try to exchange the carbon credit of different companies or even different carbon investors. And most recently, there are several companies, several startups are very interesting. They basically focus on like how to rate or how to assess the quality of the carbon credits, like B0 and silver. It's like the Moody or S&P, the Moody's and S&P in the carbon market. So we're also doing the same thing now in WeBank and collaborating with in the Guangming laboratory. So basically, we try to use our AI model and our data, try to also build a AI-driven or data-driven carbon credit rating services. So this is the result from McKinsey report. They said that in the global demand for the voluntary carbon credit market will be 15 times by 2030, and it will be almost 100 times by 2050. That means the market of voluntary carbon market is huge. So basically, the carbon credit come from two types. One is called nature-based solution. Maybe somebody know that, it's called NBS. Basically, it's like, whether you can use different way, try to protect the forest or try to, plant more trees. You can, by this way, you can get more carbon credits. The other one is called a technological solutions. It's like a solar renewable, wind renewable. So you can see in nature-based solution, the IEDD is called the IEDD part, is they can produce the most carbon credit at the present. It's called a reduced emission from deforestation and degradation. It's basically by to protect the forest of different areas. However, this is the latest report from the Guardian. I remember it's last month. And this report says that more than 80% of the rainforest carbon offset by one company is actually worthless. So why it happened? Yeah. So they found that only a few of Vera. Vera is a carbon certifier. Is a carbon certifier, and only a few number of Vera's rainforest products is useful. Almost 90% of them is useless. And even some of them, they show that some of their products can also be a threat for climate change. And for many companies like Gucci and Salesforce and those companies, they purchased a lot of carbon credit, which is actually useless. So this is what happened today. So I think you will ask why? Why most of the rainforest carbon credit are useless? I think one reason is because there's no scientific methodology to measure or to measure the carbon like stock or carbon emission of different areas. And the other one is there's no scientific methodology to evaluate the whole carbon credit products. So you can see this is the traditional way to measure the biomass or carbon stock. So basically you determine a area like with a lot of forest, right? And then you sample from this area and you manually measure the parameters to calculate the biomass by some forest expert, which is labor consuming, which is time consuming, right? And it's not that exact, it's not that accurate. So to solve this challenge, we now build a platform called a Moonshot platform, which is the first satellite AI-based carbon fintech platform to address the above mentioned challenges about the carbon market platform. So this is what we have done now. What we are doing now in WeBank and in Guangming Laboratory. Basically, we combine different kinds of data from different sensors. It could be remote sensors, it could be SAR satellite sensors, it could be LiDAR sensors. And we also use different kind of UAV, the drones, to capture the data of different areas. And by using AI algorithm to analyze the data from those sensors, we're able to accurately and high frequently to estimate the biomass and the carbon stock of different areas. This will provide a very useful result to evaluate the quality of the carbon credit. So this is another type of data we are using now. We use different types of LiDAR data. It could be from helicopter, the drones. We also use the in-field LiDAR data to collect the 3D point cloud data of one forest. So by analyzing such 3D point cloud data, we can achieve very high accurate carbon emission and carbon biomass data of different area. It's much better than the traditional way. So this is the animation shows how we can use the LiDAR data to review a very clear structure of different trees. So basically, it can help you to scan the 3D structure of the trees in very high accuracy and in very short time. So basically, you can just collect the data, just maybe within 1 day. But for the forest, expert, they take them days to only collect a few number of data points. So you can see the very clear structure of these trees. So by this way, we can very accurately to estimate the carbon stock and carbon and the carbon emission of different forest. So this is our platform. So basically, you can just select one area, and our algorithm is able to accurately to estimate the carbon the carbon biomass and the carbon stock in this area. Our last part I would like to share is about how to tackle climate change by sustainable finance. which is ESG. I think some of you may know the conception of ESG basically is the environmental, social, and governance of different companies, right? So basically you can use these three criteria, try to evaluate the performance of different company. And basically the investment company are very interested in this part because they can try to evaluate the ESG performance of different company and they can add the good company into their portfolio. So by this, you can see the AUM of ESG fund is growing very, very rapidly, especially from 2020. So that means ESG data will be very useful to evaluate a company's performance in different way. So, but the major challenge is at present it's the lack of independent, high frequent, and consistent ESG data. So at present, most of such ESG data is collected from like the annual report of the government, or like maybe some investigation data from expert, which is how to say you can only update the data in a yearly frequency. So how to solve this problem and can collect very high frequent and more accurate ESG data? We also use our platform try to solve this problem. We use different kind of data like satellite data, GPS data, IoT data, online text data, and incorporate the public disclosure data, and use machine learning algorithm, try to build our own so-called AI ESG data platform and an ESG rating platform. So because the data we're using, like in the input, is very high frequent, like GPS data or online text data or corporate data, and even the news data, right? News feed data, they could be updated daily. So basically, by this way, we build our own AI ESG platform. I will show you two examples how we can just use our data to evaluate the ESG performance of one company. For example, this is the one large steel manufacturing company in China. This area has a lot of, the polluted area. So our algorithm, our platform is able to detect the polluted area in real-time fashion. So you can see this area is, is where the polluted area is. So by this way, you can see that, okay, this company just, doing, it did very bad in their environmental part. The other one is for the biodiversity evaluation, maybe like for oil company, right? They can just, if they have they can pollute their water, right? And that could be very dangerous for different animals and even for different biodiversity, right? So we just use the classification algorithm, try to classify the different areas of this company, like this is the factory area, residential area, and grassland and water. So basically by this way, you can evaluate the biodiversity, how one company and the water pollution and air pollution is impacting the biodiversity in this area. So by this way, you can see we can just evaluate the E performance of one company. Similarly, we can do the same for the S performance, by collecting the data from the job, listing company like LinkedIn, or Mama in China. We can evaluate, okay, how the company is performing in the social part, right? And for the governance part, we can also use the similar data, especially for the news feed data. We can see, okay, where the board structure is good. So by this way, we build our own ESG platform. We call it AI ESG platform. So basically, it shows the ESG performance of one company. So basically, at present, our platform has covered more than 300 listed companies in Asia. So this is what we have done, what we are doing now in WeBank or in our previous company. So the last part, I would like to share some new technology and how we could, embrace the new technology for sensible economics and to tackle climate change. The first one, I think, is the AIGC. Everybody now is talking about AIGC, right? And ChatGPT, everybody talking ChatGPT. How we can use such technology for us to tackle climate change? So our team now is developing the carbon fintech platform based on large language model. And we call this not ChatGPT, we call it carbon GPT. So basically, we feed the carbon data, like, the documents for the carbon products, and then different, how the carbon emission come from, and those carbon related documents to feed such data into this system. We just train the GPT to be an expert in carbon area. So basically, this carbon GPT will help us to read or to summarize thousands of pages of carbon credit products. For example, if there's for one carbon credit products for one forest, there'll be thousands of pages, documents. It's very boring to read them. You have to hire the expert to read them. So fortunately, we have some forest expert in our team, so they can read these documents. But if we can use the Carbon DB to help us like to read the paper, 24/7, fashion, that way we can save a lot of time for us, right? So this is one topic that AIGC. I think AIGC can help us a lot in carbon to fight against the climate change. The second one is Web3 and blockchain. This is very interesting because as I said, carbon trading and carbon exchange and carbon market, this is a critical part to achieve the carbon neutral, right? So if you can use like blockchain or other Web3 technology, try to make the whole trade on the whole carbon market more transparent, more stable, right? That'd be very useful, like to maintain the credibility of the whole market. So this is some companies, some startups in the US, they have already done this. So basically they use NFT, they use Web3 with the blockchain, try to just build a more transparent carbon market in the world. So the last part is so-called, I call it orbit computing. This is a project we have collaborated with Zhongshan University and another satellite manufacturing company in Shenzhen. So basically, today, if we want to analyze the satellite image data, we have first, use the satellite, launch the satellite first in the space and capture the data, satellite image data, and then you transmit the data onto the ground data center, right? And then you access the data from like maybe some cloud computing centers, and then you use AI algorithm to analyze the data. It will take days or even like maybe weeks delay, right? What if we can just put the AI chips into the satellite and they can perform the AI computing in the space? It could happen. So we have already do the test. So basically we just embed the AI algorithm into the AI chips, and then we put the chip into the satellite and they can perform AI computing. But you have to do a lot of work because in a space, the temperature could be extremely high or extremely low, right? And there's you also have to reduce your AI model so that they do not emit a lot of hot, right? So basically a lot of heat. So basically you have to modify your AI model to just work into the space. So this is another topic where I think it's also very interesting. That means you can perform the AI real-time computing in the space. So basically they can directly send the results to the ground instead of the raw satellite imagery data. So this is three interesting topics that I think will be very useful or very important in the future. So basically, this is the underlying philosophy of my Senseable Economics. But basically, in the Princeton, I use video camera sensor to try to quantify the collective behavior of animal groups. And in Baidu, I use geolocation data from smartphone sensor to try to quantify the dynamics of a human behavior or human society. And in WeBank and in BlackRock, I use the data from IoT sensors and from a satellite or from other sensors, try to quantify the dynamics of our economic system. So this is the whole, structure of Senseable Economics. So basically, it's try to answer one question: is how to understand our complex system. The system could different kinds of complex system by a data-driven methodology. So my research has been reported by different medias from MIT Technical Review, to Wall Street Journal and so on. We also collaborated with some UN organizations, like we have a report on impact of COVID and pandemic to China's small companies with UNDP. We also write a report about how to use AI and sensor data for ESG rating with the UN Habitat. And I'm also writing a book called Senseable Economics. I name it like the economics in AI and IoT era. So this my new is on the way. I will be letting you know when it's finished. Okay, so today is my talk. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very happy to share what I'm doing now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for this great talk. It's a very exciting talking about the artificial intelligence and big data how that affects the society, right, and the economic system. So now we enter in Q&A session. So as our previous practice, I think I will read some of the questions to our speaker. And if you need further clarification or follow-up question, just please then open up your mic. So as a moderator, maybe I should ask the first question. From the economics standpoint, this is a very important research. Okay, so my question is this. From your talk, we can see that you can give very accurate high-frequency measure of certain human behavior activities and also kind of the business activities such as employment and the production and so on. The question is, how is this relates to a robust policy making in terms of, speaking of policy making, we know that, for example, this US Federal Reserve Bank, right? They announced this interest rate target not in a very high frequent, it's like a certain time. Of course, it's important to have an accurate measure, but I think a robust policy is important for the stableness of the market, right? And also to help people to form a well-informed expectation, such as what I look forward in the future. But I totally understand. Your approach is very important, right? But how is kind of any thoughts on this connection between your high frequency measure and the kind of relatively low or kind of a robust policy making? Right? How is your work will help in that regard?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For the policymakers, I think they have different source of information like for them to make their decisions, right? I think our research just only, provide one point of the view to help them to understand what is happening. So I think that could be useful for their, when they make the different, the decision or policies. And I don't think, our research can be, can just, help, could be play a critical role, for the policymakers, but it could be to assist them, right, to understand what is happening. So, let's take, the ghost town research, as an example. So basically, you can see that, if you want to measure the impact of different policy, right, it will take years to see how it will happen, right? Maybe for one city, it could be empty for 3 years, but later, maybe 5 years later, more and more people, they move to there, right? So that means, I think it shows that, if for the public, they can see the different story of ghost towns. And for the policymakers, they can see, okay, their policy could be work several years later, right? So that means I'd be very happy if our research could assist them to do for them to help them to make a decision. But I think our research will be more useful for the investors, for the market researchers. So this is our research focus on. So at present.
All right, thank you very much. Now, let me read these questions. The first question is from Professor Pierre Landry. So his question is regarding that you talk about your experience while you were in Baidu and after you left. It seems like the project is kind of halted. So I think his question is, how do we kind of consider this sustainability, right? Or continuation of this research is not because if one team is working on it, if this team is focusing on some other things, and then they stop the publishing those indexes and so on. So
exactly, that's a very, very good question. Speaking of this, I admire Harvarian in Google, the chief economist in Google, right? And he's very lucky because he can work at Google and he can just do his economic research by using Google's data for a long time. But in China, the company, they could just change, they could change their strategy from time to time, right? Sometimes, okay, your research on, analyzing geological data is very important for their business, but maybe years later, okay, they will change their strategy. So that is the truth, it's very difficult for us, to keep the stability of your research, especially if you do your research in the industry, not like doing the research in a university, right? So this is the reason why I'm very happy to try to collaborate with different university or different research institutes, because if you work in university, you can have stable funds for your research. But for working for me, working in the industries, it's indeed very difficult for me to just make the research more consistent or more stable, right? But I try on my hard, I try to, as I said, in Baidu, I can use the geolocation data for China's economic research. But later, when I left Baidu, I can also use another type of data, like the satellite image data for the research. And they can validate each other, and they can also tell you a different view or different story. So this is the way for me to solve this problem.
All right. Next question is from Professor Tony Tam. So he was asking, has any team already started the use of this AI assistant sensing method to measure shadow economic activities, which is very interesting. Any thoughts?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think some of the researchers in China, they are doing this type of research by using other data, but I'm not sure it's using the sensor data, right? They can collect the data like maybe online or something, right? And they can also use different data maybe from the government to try to solve their problem. But at present, our team have not started this type of research because, how to say, one thing, the shadow economic activity is also a very sensitive area, right, for research. So at present, we are not doing this, but I know there's some research in China they're working on this, but I'm not sure they're using the sensor data. I think maybe they are also still using pretty traditional way to evaluate the shadow economic activities in China. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think like for the shadow economic research, I think maybe it'd be good if you are working in the government, you can get more data, right, for this. But yeah, maybe that could not be public.
But then I thought the whole point of the sensible economics approach is you're using consistent, independent data in the public domain. That would have been wasted. You use those methods to gauge something hidden, usually not not even from official data. You get those information.
Okay. So Tony, do you have any further questions?
No.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is from Professor Jacob Thomas. And his question is on how many jobs or employment the different energy production sectors currently produce, how that might change in the future. Or Jacob, do you want to just speak up? I think not sure about the second half of your question.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in this because I have a good friend at UCLA who I think he's finishing his PhD. It's in ethnography of coal country in China and about the more Marxist perspective that a lot of the workers have about, it's kind of like what you see in West Virginia, like with the coal mining, and they don't, they're resistant to this sort of change, and they're very critical of sort of this top-down environmental push. So I think for a lot of those workers, they would be very concerned about like how many opportunities they would have in these other sectors. And then there's the whole discursive struggle of just persuading people that this is the future and that they can't hold on to these old jobs. Of course, the labor politics situation is very different in mainland China than the US, but or other countries. But I'm just curious if what you think about like the prospects and comparing these different sectors, because it seems like the labor capital ratio of inputs into the sectors, and we see these images of like large solar panels. And sometimes you wonder like how many people actually are necessary, workers are actually necessary to kind of build these versus like coal plants, oil industry, and so on. But I have no idea. So I thought you could just cast light on that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So regarding employment and condition in that, actually, because we don't have the geolocation data in this area at the present, so it's hard for us to evaluate the employment condition in different energy sectors. But I think I think we can use another way, try to evaluate the employment condition in this area. For example, maybe we can track the number of trucks in the coal mining area, right? But this way, maybe another way, try to evaluate how many people work there. And for the solar farms, Yeah, the solar farm could be huge, that could be very large, but only a few number of people working there, right? So I think basically if you can track the location of the offices in the solar farms, as I said, to track the production of Tesla, you can see, okay, how many people park their cars in the parking lot if they drive their car to the office. So by this way, I think you can try to track the employment trends of those sectors. So another way to answer this question, maybe you can grab the data from some job listing website in China. Yeah, there's several job listing companies in China. It's not LinkedIn, cannot use LinkedIn in China, but there's a lot of other alternative websites. Basically, you can try to track how many people, like the solar farm company or wind power company is recruiting, right? So, but I think for coal mining company, maybe the situation is different, because basically I think for many workers, maybe they are not using like the online way to find a job, right? Maybe still have a lot of offline ways in China try to secure a job for them. So yeah, this is my thoughts on this question. Yeah, first of all, you can track the number of cars in parking lots of some office areas or in this company, in these sectors or companies. The other one is you can grab some job listing data, try to evaluate the employment trends of these sectors.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So the next question is from Luo Tong. I think is he or she a PhD student here? Okay, Luo Tong has two questions. The first is on, you mentioned the number of cars to calculate the ghost town.
Yeah.
So the question is, what period do you use? Is it the daytime or nighttime, or both daytime or nighttime? Related to that, the second question is whether the nighttime data is probably more feasible, because people return from home and they can maybe they turn on the light or something at the night. And yeah, so many neighborhoods has also the question is, many neighborhoods have the car parked underground, and the car may not be detected. So in this way, I think that you have talked about so how many cars parked in the parking lot, right? So but what if this underground parking, then how do you solve this kind of problem?
Yeah, very good question. So actually for this research, basically we rely on the frequency of our satellite image data. So basically there is like daytime data, right? It could be updated, maybe remember it's weekly. That means we can track the number of cars, each week or several weeks. Yeah, made for the daytime satellite data. Yeah, you mentioned the nighttime data. Yes, it is correct. And actually, when we do that research, we also analyze the nighttime data for one indicator to validate our research. Yeah, I didn't mention it, but yeah, yes, we did rely on the nighttime data. I remember that data is from Wuhan University. They launched one satellite in the space that is able to capture very high resolution of the nighttime data on the ground. So indeed, we also use the nighttime data to validate our results. And the third one, you mentioned that yes, you cannot just track the number of cars on the underground parking lots, right? Yeah, that's true. But all that being said, if you can track all the cars on the ground, maybe like in the working time, right? There's still a very good indicator to see how many people work. Yeah. So this is that means there's no perfect data for one topic, but you can rely on different types of data. Try to see the story from different views. If you collect the views from all different, different views, you can have a, very whole, complete, structure of the story. So this is my understanding of how you use, the so-called, sensor data for economic research.
Right, thanks. The next question, probably a student from Ho. So the question is, how can you link the daily, everyday phenomenon, like the number of cars in the parking lot? I think that may be generalized to the daily life, maybe also your cell phone, or you go shopping and those activities. So how do you link those daily phenomena to economic phenomena, especially something that can be measured with data that is easy to access, such as the satellite data? I think that's the question, or maybe you want to speak up on this.
Yeah, I think counting the number, counting the number of cars in parking lots could be a very useful indicator for different applications. For example, like, as what we have done, we can evaluate the performance of one company, right? Like shopping mall, right? How many people, if we count the number of parking cars in the parking lot, we can evaluate, whether the consumption of this shopping mall is coming back or it's coming to recovery or not, right? And you can also do the same thing, like, as we did in ghost town research, if you can count the number of cars in the whole city, okay, you can evaluate the, whether the city is good or bad, right? So I think you can use that data to solve the economic problem from both micro and macro, depends on what kind of question you are going to answer. For example, you can also, I remember some researchers in the US is also try to count the number of cars in also in some coal mining area, try to evaluate like for this investment, if you are investment in those areas, right?
Thanks.
Yeah, but this type of data also has their drawback, especially if you cannot just like track the cars parked in the underground parking plot, especially in big cities like Hong Kong, New York. Maybe that way it doesn't work, right? But you can rely on other type of vehicles, like you can track the number of ships, right, in different area, right? You don't have to like just simply track the number of cars. You can track other type of things. I remember some people, they try to track the number of the ships in the port, different ports, try to evaluate the export and development of different areas.
Thanks. Is there any other questions from the audience? Oh, Professor Huangbo has a question, please.
Okay. I think it's very informative and stimulating talk. Indeed, you have delivered a very fascinating presentation.
Thanks.
I think it is great to apply satellite remote sensing technology to detect economic phenomena or economic performance. But it must have posed many challenges to satellite remote sensing technology, especially on data unavailability. I was just wondering, did your team encounter any such problems?
Yeah, exactly. There's no, as I said, there's no perfect data for economic research, and the satellite imagery data is only one type of them, right? So speaking of the satellite imagery data, we're not only using the remote sensing data, right, from satellite, but we also rely on other type of satellites, like SAR satellite, right, which is able to just scan through the cloud to see what is happening on the ground, right? And we also use the, for the carbon research, we also rely on the LiDAR satellite, which can scan the 3D structure of the ground, right, to try to see what is happening on the forest. And so you have to combine the satellite imagery data to other type of sensor data for your research, like we can also use UAV, right, the drones, right, you can just attach different sensors like LiDAR sensor, like multiple spectral sensors and different kind of sensors, into the drones, and you can have very high accuracy data from those sensors. So this is the reason why I mentioned that you have to pay more attention on the data from self-driving cars, because the data from the sensors in the self-driving cars will be much more useful. It's much more, I think they can coverage almost every corner in the city. So that is, I think, if you want to use the sensor data for your economic research, you have to be very, you have to pay more attention on the development of different kind of sensors to see what kind of sensor data could be helpful in your research. So this is why I think you have to embrace new technology into your research, right? Sometimes you can not only rely on the sensor data, you can also, like, years ago, a lot of researchers rely on the online data, like web search data and such data, right, for your research. So I think in the future there'll be more and more sensors everywhere, even the wearable devices like your Apple Watch or something like that, right? You can get more data from those sensors. So maybe in the future, in the metaverse, right, everybody will have different sensors in their body, right? So that data will be extremely useful for such research. So this is I think you cannot rely on one type of sensor data for research. You have to combine different kind of data together, and you have to validate the results of each data sources, right, or each data source, right? And last one is you have to very keen on the development of sensor development to see what kind of sensor data could be used in your research.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tony, please.
Hi, Tony. Hey.
Hi. I would like to follow up my earlier question, not on the circular economy, but the technology you are using, both satellite data as well as the new Internet of Things data have been around in Europe and North America. I'm wondering whether you are racing alongside other research teams, whether it's at MIT or elsewhere, doing on similar things, using similar technology, answering similar questions. Do you see a rising frontier, not only within China, but elsewhere competing?
Yeah, I know there's many labs, especially in the US. Actually, they are doing pretty the same thing, as I mentioned, like, the MIT Senseable City Lab, right? They're also doing a lot of very interesting research in this area. And there are many, I think a lot of other economists in the US, as I said, Harvard, right, in Google, and many other researchers, I remember, they also use different type of so-called, alternative data for their economic research. For example, they use they use the message data in a smartphone, try to evaluate the wealth condition, to evaluate the wealth condition of in Africa countries, right? Some people, they also try to use the satellite data to count, the roof, the roof solar panels in the US, right? So basically, I think we are using pretty similar data and try to answer the question in different views of different countries. I think they mainly focus on like what is happening in Africa, what is happening like in America somewhere, right? But we are focusing on what is happening in China, because in China is a country with very different, economic condition, economic policy, and given what is happening for the geopolitical attention at the present, I think I'm be more interested in trying to answer the question of what is happening in China, because I think a lot of more questions to be answered, maybe than other countries. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
To more outputs from your team.
Thank you.
All right, any question from the audience? Actually, I may have one, probably last question for today. I mean, that's kind of a question, it's last discussion type of. I remember in your slides, you have showed I think to me, the very important result that you compare the official numbers with your high frequency measure and show that those are highly correlated. Which for me, that's kind of, very useful.
Yeah.
Why we use the sensible economics, right? Because a lot of those indicators are published like quarterly or monthly.
Yeah.
But let's say the pandemic happens so fast. So it's just if we wait for 1 month or 1 quarter to see the results, it's probably too late to make any intelligent policy. Okay,
exactly.
So that's the background. Then my discussion or question is this: when you publish the high frequency measure, of course the official numbers are not out yet.
Yeah. Yes.
However, I think it's still going back to my earlier point on the robust measure. I think it probably will be helpful if you combine different sources. Yeah. So one maybe the satellite, or like the data, or also the social network data, or different sources, and then kind of cross validate each other. Yes. So that you have a really robust measure. Otherwise, probably only see one part of the picture. However, not because let's say in the pandemic, if people do not go to office due to this restriction, they may work from home, right? So, but they can still be productive in a way. However, if you also have their social network data, then they will say, okay, I'm working at home, I read 2 papers and so on, right? So you can see, oh, people are still. So that's just kind of my thought on this. How do you kind of robustify your measure? Let's say if you can only capture one part of the picture, not this.
I totally agree. I think the advantage of sensor data for economic research is they can compile the very high frequency indicators, like they can be updated maybe weekly or monthly, right? Compared with the public data that could be like quarterly, right? And the disadvantage is that you have to validate your results with different indicators of maybe you also have to compare your results with the public data, right? And you can also not only rely on one data to compare indicators, you can also compare indicators from different data sources and try to cross validate each other. Actually, this is a very important way to solve the problem, to solve the disadvantage of so-called sensor data. And actually, for the data itself, for the sensor data itself, it could be changed. For example, in China, there's more. At first, only a few non people use smartphone, but later, more and more people use smartphone, right? And the structure of the data itself is also changing. That you have to consider this, thing in your research. For example, even if there is an indicator shows that the number of like employment going up, it doesn't mean that a lot of people work. Maybe just simply because more and more people use smartphones, right? So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think today we have learned so much from you.
Thank you,
It's a very exciting frontier research. And
hope we can meet in person sometime in the next month.
Definitely.
Go to Hong Kong.
Yes,
All right, thank you everyone.
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. Wu, again for your great talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See you
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.